Ian Thompson, you cannot leave that pancake half burned again, a tiny voice shouted from the living room. Ian groaned as he flipped the pancake with a plastic spatula, the edges slightly crispier than he wanted. Avery, I am one man, two hands, and zero superpowers. His 7-year-old daughter peeked around the corner, arms crossed, wearing a stained unicorn hoodie. Well, I'm one girl, zero pancakes, and very hungry. He laughed under his breath and plated the best one. All right, chef critic. Breakfast is served. Life wasn't glamorous. Their apartment was small. Rent was late again. His job at the hardware store barely covered necessities. But Ian had Avery, and that made every hard day worth it. Later that morning, he dropped her off at school, then headed to the downtown shelter where he'd started volunteering 3 weeks ago. It was something to keep his mind off the bills and the weight on his shoulders. Helping others somehow made him feel like he hadn't lost everything. He didn't expect her to be there again. Madeline Everett. She was always early, always pulling her hair into a low ponytail like she didn't care how flawless she looked. She wore jeans and old sneakers like everyone else, but there was something about her that didn't quite blend in. Like she didn't belong in this world but chose to be there anyway. Today, she was unpacking canned goods, sleeves rolled up, focused. Morning, Ian said, stepping beside her. Madeline turned, her smile quick and warm. Morning, Ian. You're late. I'm fashionably behind schedule, he replied, reaching for a box. You always this bossy? Only when people show up after the pancake hour, she teased. He glanced at her sideways. You spying on my breakfast routine now? Maybe, she said, eyes twinkling. They worked side by side, stocking shelves and sorting donations. Ian noticed how she talked to every person like they mattered. She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, and she never acted like she was better than anyone. He liked that. A lot. When a child tripped running across the food hall, Madeline knelt beside him without hesitation, brushing dirt from his scraped knee like she'd done it 100 times. Ian watched the way she calmed the boy with a soft voice and steady hands. You ever think about having kids? He asked out of nowhere, instantly regretting how forward that sounded. Madeline blinked, surprised. Yeah, I've thought about it. I've got a daughter, he said, unloading a box. Avery. She's 7. Smarter than me and not afraid to prove it. Madeline's eyes warmed. You don't talk about her much. I don't want to scare people off with dad stories. Try me, she said softly. And just like that, he found himself telling her everything from Avery's love of pancakes to how he'd been raising her alone since her mom walked out 3 years ago. He didn't usually open up like that. But Madeline didn't flinch. She listened. She always listened. By the time they finished their shift, Ian's shirt was soaked in sweat, and he was starving. Madeline wiped her hands on a paper towel and said, You hungry? Always, he grinned. There's a taco truck 2 blocks from here. My treat. His brows lifted. You bribing me with tacos now? Yep. It's working, isn't it? It was. They sat on the curb beneath a tree, eating spicy chicken tacos and sipping sodas. Ian hadn't laughed that much in a long time. She was quick-witted, curious, and asked questions like she genuinely wanted to know more about him. So what do you do when you're not saving the world at the shelter? She asked. I work at a hardware store. It's glamorous. That explains the calluses. Ian raised an eyebrow. And what do you do? There was a pause. A small one. I work in finance, she said, brushing a hair behind her ear. It's boring. Huh. You don't seem boring. He didn't push. Why would he? She was clearly someone who'd chosen this place for a reason. Maybe she was running from something too. I like that you volunteer, he said. I like that you don't run away from hard things, she replied. They sat there quietly for a moment, watching the cars pass. Something shifted between them, subtle but real. He wasn't used to this feeling like someone saw him. Not as a struggling dad, not as a guy barely getting by. Just him. Madeline stood, brushing off her jeans. Same time tomorrow? He nodded. Wouldn't miss it. He didn't realize she'd watched him walk back toward the bus stop, her fingers tightening around the edge of her designer handbag, the one she always had beneath a charity-issued apron. Madeline Everett wasn't just someone who worked in finance. She was the sole heir to Everett Holdings. Her net worth? Just over $40 million. And she had just fallen for a man who had no idea that the tacos she bought him cost less than what she made in 2 minutes. She smiled to herself. He didn't need to know. Not yet. I think you're allergic to free time. Ian said as he caught up to Madeline outside the shelter the following Saturday morning. She was crouched beside a crate of donated coats, already sorting them by size. She looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. I could say the same about you. It's your day off, isn't it? Avery's at a birthday party. First one she's been invited to all year. I had a window. Madeline paused, eyes narrowing just slightly. You didn't want to stay? Get a break. Ian shrugged. I like it here. Besides, I'd rather be useful than sitting on the couch watching cartoons without her. She smiled, but said nothing. Instead, she handed him a stack of worn jackets and nodded toward the rack to his left. They worked in easy silence until she broke it. You ever think about changing jobs? Ian looked over, surprised. What makes you ask that? You're good with people. You've got presence. I don't know. I just don't see you behind a counter. He chuckled. Presence? I'm not a politician. Not what I meant, she said, standing to her full height. You've got this. Steadiness. Like if the world was falling apart, you'd still figure out how to fix a leaky pipe. He snorted. That's oddly specific. Don't laugh. That's rare. Ian leaned against the table, arms folded. And what about you? You ever think about walking away from the spreadsheets and boardrooms? Madeline hesitated. Sometimes. But it's not that simple. Because of money? He asked, and immediately regretted it. Her gaze shifted. Not offended. Just guarded. Because of expectations, she replied, voice quieter now. Some people don't get to choose how they live. They inherit it. Ian tilted his head. You sound like you've lived both sides. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for a clipboard and began checking inventory. My father built a company from scratch. He never let me forget it. Wanted me to be tougher than anyone else in the room. Ian watched her carefully. That why you come here? To feel something real? She looked up, startled like he'd touched something she hadn't shown anyone else. Yeah, she said finally. Something like that. The air between them shifted again. Not flirty, not playful, something deeper. Unspoken understanding. Before he could say more, the shelter manager called out for help unloading a delivery truck, and they got pulled in opposite directions. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of lifting, sorting, and distributing. By the time the sun dipped behind the downtown skyline, Ian's shirt was damp and his shoulders ached. He found Madeline near the back entrance, tying a garbage bag shut. Want a ride home? He asked. She blinked. I thought you took the bus. Sometimes I borrow my neighbor's car if she's not using it. I filled the tank this morning. Madeline hesitated, then nodded. All right, but only if I can pick the music. Deal. As long as it's not opera. The car was old, the passenger window stuck halfway down, and the air conditioner wheezed like it was on life support. But she didn't complain. Instead, she leaned back in the torn seat, kicked off her shoes, and rifled through his glove compartment until she found a scratched CD labeled Avery's Mix. You let your daughter make your playlists? Ian grinned. She's got better taste than me. She included Elton John and Taylor Swift. I approve. She insists music should either make you cry or dance. No in between. Madeline laughed, then caught herself turning toward him. You talk about her like she's magic. She is, he said without hesitation, eyes fixed on the road. She's the reason I keep showing up when I'd rather fall apart. Madeline didn't say anything for a full minute. Then, softly, you make it look easy. It's not. I know. He parked outside a modest brownstone on the edge of a quieter block. She reached for the door handle, then paused. You want to come up for a minute? I've got iced tea, and maybe something stronger if today completely wrecked you. Ian hesitated. You sure? Madeline nodded. Yeah, I am. The apartment surprised him. It wasn't flashy. Clean, minimalist, neutral colors. Not a trace of who she really was. You just move in? He asked, glancing around. 6 months ago. It's spotless. I don't like clutter, she said simply. Makes it harder to think. She poured the tea, handed him a glass, and sat across from him on the couch. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city buzzed faintly outside the window. Then she asked, what would you do if money didn't matter? Ian didn't answer right away. He watched the sunset paint gold streaks across her hardwood floor. I'd open a repair shop, he said at last. One of those old-school places. No corporate rules. Just honest work. Maybe teach some kids who've never held a wrench how to build something that lasts. She smiled slowly. You should. Yeah, well, dreams are expensive. Madeline leaned forward. What if they weren't? He looked at her then, something unreadable in his expression. What are you really asking me? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Nothing, she said finally. Just wondering. The silence stretched. Then he stood, glass empty. I should go? Avery'll be home soon. Madeline walked him to the door. Thanks for today. He looked at her, really looked at her. You're different, he said quietly. So are you. Then he was gone. Madeline leaned against the door after it shut, heart racing. She had meant to tell him tonight. But standing in her own apartment, with his presence still lingering in the air, she couldn't bring herself to say the words. Not yet. Not like this. The next time Ian saw Madeline, she wasn't at the shelter. It was early afternoon, the sun glaring off the pavement as he stepped through the loading dock, scanning the tables where she usually sorted produce by now. Her absence made the space feel hollow, like someone had pulled the color from it. He tried not to notice. Hey, Thompson, the shelter manager called from the back. You good to run the outreach van today? We're short again. Sure, he said, grabbing the clipboard. Who's riding with me? No one. Just you. The intern bailed. He drove the rusted van through side streets and neighborhoods he knew better than he wished he did. He handed out blankets, canned goods, and hygiene kits with a practiced rhythm. But the entire time, his thoughts drifted to the gap at the produce table. The place she should have been. By 5, he was back at the shelter, unloading boxes with sore arms when a voice called from behind. Rough day. He turned, and there she was. Madeline stood in jeans and a navy jacket, her hair swept up loosely like she'd rushed from somewhere. Her lips were faintly pink, and there was a crease between her brows like she'd been deep in thought for hours. Didn't think you were coming, Ian said, brushing his palms on his thighs. I had a meeting I couldn't move. You all right? She nodded, but her eyes didn't match the motion. He handed her the last box without asking more. They didn't speak again until the van was locked, and the street lamps buzzed to life above them. I want to show you something, she said suddenly, tossing her keys into her bag. Now. Ian followed her across 2 blocks and around a corner until they stopped in front of a building he'd passed 100 times. It was tall and glassy, the kind of place you only looked at, never entered. A doorman opened the entrance without question. He hesitated. You sure this isn't a mistake? Madeline glanced back. Not even a little. The elevator smelled faintly of eucalyptus and wood polish. When the doors opened again, they stepped into a hallway with walls so white they looked lit from within. She stopped at a door near the end, pulled a card from her bag, and unlocked it. Inside was a penthouse. Full-length windows. A skyline view that stole his breath. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The air smelled like lavender and something richer, something unfamiliar. Ian stood frozen. Where are we? Madeline dropped her bag on a marble counter and looked at him without flinching. My apartment. He turned toward her slowly. I thought you lived in the brownstone. I rent that place. This is where I actually live. He didn't speak. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him. My name is Madeline Everett. My father was Harold Everett. Everett Holdings is mine now. The silence stretched until it felt like the room might crack under it. Ian took a breath. Everett Holdings. As in yes. He stared at her. You're a millionaire. Closer to billionaire. He exhaled once, sharply. And you've been volunteering at the shelter for what, fun? No, she said quickly, turning to face him. Because I needed to remember who I was before the boardrooms and quarterly reports. I didn't plan on meeting you, Ian. You changed everything. He took a step back, eyes narrowing. So the tacos, the apartment, the iced tea. That was all. Real, she said, cutting him off. Every part of it. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. He shook his head, pacing once across the polished floor. You let me talk about Avery. About bills and broken car windows. You let me open up to you. And the whole time, you were living like this? I didn't want it to matter. It does, he snapped. You think I can just pretend this is normal? No, I don't, she said, stepping closer. But I hoped maybe you'd understand why I didn't lead with it. He turned to her. You know what this feels like? Like a joke that I wasn't in on. Her voice cracked as she spoke. It wasn't. I swear it wasn't. He ran a hand through his hair, his pulse thudding in his ears. I don't belong in this world, Madeline. Her eyes brimmed. Neither do I. He paused, caught off guard by that. I've spent my whole life trying to fit into something that was built before I was even born, she said softly. But when I'm with you, I don't have to pretend. You made me feel like I could breathe again. Ian didn't know what to say. She stepped forward once more. I didn't fall for you because you were different. I fell for you because you saw me before you saw the name. He swallowed, throat tight. Yeah, well, now I see both. He turned toward the door. Ian, I have to pick up my daughter. She didn't follow him. When the elevator doors closed behind him, Madeline stood in the middle of her penthouse, surrounded by everything she'd ever inherited, and none of it felt heavier than the silence he left behind. Rain tapped softly against the cracked windshield of the borrowed car as Ian sat parked outside Avery's school, the engine idling. She burst through the doors in her oversized raincoat, backpack bouncing behind her. When she climbed into the back seat, her eyes lit up. Dad, guess what? I got picked for the school play. I'm gonna be the narrator. That's, like, the most lines. Ian twisted in his seat, forcing a smile. That's amazing, kiddo. She narrowed her eyes. You don't look amazed. You look weird. I'm just tired, he said, rubbing his jaw. Long day. You always say that when something's wrong. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached back and tapped her shoe. We'll celebrate this weekend, all right? I'll make pancakes. The good kind. As he pulled onto the road, his thoughts drifted again. It had been 3 days since he walked out of that penthouse. 3 days of silence. She hadn't reached out. He hadn't either. But he hadn't stopped thinking about her. Not once. That night, long after Avery had gone to sleep with a script clutched to her chest, Ian sat on the worn couch, phone in hand. He opened his contacts. Her name stared back at him. He didn't call. Instead, the next morning, he showed up at the shelter early before the staff had even unlocked the doors. He waited outside, arms crossed, heartbeat loud in his ears. She arrived just before 9. Her steps slowed when she saw him. She wore a navy raincoat over a plain dress, hair tied back like usual, but her posture was hesitant. You came, she said. Ian nodded. We need to talk. She looked around, then gestured toward the alley beside the building where the delivery crates were usually stacked. They stood beneath the narrow awning, the rain muffling everything else. I've been rewriting what I wanted to say for 3 days, she began, voice low. But none of it sounded right. I don't want a speech, he said. I want the truth. Madeline met his gaze. All right, here it is. I've spent most of my life feeling like I was being watched, measured, inherited. So when I met you, and you didn't treat me like an investment portfolio or a press release, I held on to that too tightly. I wasn't trying to manipulate you. I just didn't want to lose what we had. Ian's jaw tightened. You should have told me. I was honest with you. About everything. I know. And I hated myself for not matching that. He leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed. It felt like you created a version of yourself that fit into my world. And when I found out the truth, it made me question if any of it was real. She stepped closer, eyes never leaving his. It was. Every second. The rain picked up, tapping harder against the metal awning. Ian exhaled slowly. You know what the hardest part was? What? I didn't care about the money. Still don't. But you not trusting me with the truth. That hurt. Her voice cracked. I didn't think I deserved you. That stopped him. You're the one people don't see coming, she continued. You're the guy who builds things without needing applause. Who raises a daughter with more love than most kids will ever know. And I was terrified you'd walk away if I showed you the part of my life that never felt like mine to begin with. Ian stared at her, the tension in his chest loosening just slightly. She's doing a play, he said suddenly. Madeline blinked. Avery. Yeah, she's the narrator. She's been practicing every night. I didn't even know she wanted to act. That's amazing. I want you to come, he said. Madeline stilled. Are you sure? I'm not asking for a second chance to start something fake. I'm asking for a real beginning. With everything on the table. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. Then yes, I'll be there. The day of the play, the school auditorium buzzed with parents and siblings. Ian sat in the third row, wearing the one button-down shirt that still fit him, while Avery peeked from behind the curtain and waved like a maniac. Madeline arrived just before the lights dimmed, slipping into the seat beside him. She wore no makeup, no designer heels, just a soft blue sweater and flats. She looked like someone who belonged there. Avery nailed every line. At the end, when the cast bowed, she pointed directly at Ian and blew him a kiss. Then she spotted Madeline and grinned wider. Afterward, in the hallway packed with proud families, Madeline knelt and handed Avery a small silver charm on a chain. What is it? Avery asked. It's a compass, Madeline said. So you always know where you're going. And how far you've already come. Avery threw her arms around her. That night, back at the apartment, Ian waited until Avery fell asleep before walking onto the fire escape. Madeline joined him, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. I've been thinking, he said, taking a mug. About that shop? You should do it. I might. You won't be alone. He turned to her. I want to invest in it, she said. Not because I'm trying to fix anything, but because I believe in it. In you. And I want to build something together. He studied her face, the nervous edge behind her words. You planning to be hands-on with this? I already bought steel-toed boots, she said. That made him laugh, really laugh, for the first time in days. He leaned in, brushing his lips against hers, slow and deliberate. When they pulled apart, she whispered, What was that for? For showing up. Months later, the shop opened on a quiet corner in the neighborhood where Ian grew up. The sign read, Everett and Thompson Repairs. Restorations. Second chances. Avery painted the door yellow herself. On the first day, Madeline stood beside Ian in a white sundress, hands covered in sawdust. He kissed her temple as the ribbon was cut. No secrets, no masks, just love, raw and honest, built like the shop itself, one piece at a time. And this time, it was theirs. All of it. Forever. You're holding the drill like it's a weapon, Ian said, leaning against the newly installed workbench as Madeline stood in front of a cabinet door with the power tool in hand, her stance cautious. I've seen you fix 3 motors this morning and replace a faucet with one hand, she said. Forgive me if I'm feeling a little out of my league. You're doing fine, he replied, stepping closer and gently adjusting her grip. Thumb here. Pressure steady. Let the tool do the work. Madeline exhaled slowly, then pressed the bit into the wood and drilled the final hinge into place, the cabinet door swinging open smoothly. She stared at it, stunned. Okay, that was satisfying. Ian grinned. Told you. The bell over the shop door jingled, and Avery ran inside, her backpack bouncing. Dad, Ms. Carter gave me a gold star for my book report on Marie Curie. That's the 4th one this month. She's on a streak, Ian said, offering his hand for a high five. Madeline held up a wrapped sandwich. Grilled cheese from the cafe down the block. Figured she'd be hungry. Avery took it with a grin and sat cross-legged on the back counter, peeling the paper back. You're the best. I try. The shop had been open for 6 weeks, and business was steady. Ian had already fixed enough leaky sinks and jam drawers to fill a portfolio, and Madeline surprisingly had taken to managing the books and schedule with more enthusiasm than she'd shown in any boardroom. Her designer laptop now sat beside a mug that read, Fix it with love, and she used both daily. But even with all the progress, there was one thing they hadn't talked about yet. Your mother called, Madeline said quietly once Avery was preoccupied with her sandwich and a book. Ian looked up from where he was tightening a drawer slide. What did she say? She asked if I was still playing house with the handyman. He wiped his hands on a rag. Charming. I told her I wasn't playing. Ian met her eyes. You sure about that? I'm building something real here. With you. That's not a game. He walked around the counter and stood in front of her. Do you want her to be part of it? Madeline hesitated. I want her to see that I'm happy, that I made a choice for myself. Then invite her. She studied his face. She might say something cruel. I've been called worse, he said. Avery once told me I make eggs like a cafeteria goblin. Madeline laughed, then leaned her forehead against his. You really mean it? I want everyone to know who we are. No hiding, no pretending. Later that week, Madeline's mother arrived at the shop in a black town car that looked out of place on the narrow street. She stepped out in a tailored coat and pearl earrings, her expression unreadable as she entered the store. Ian greeted her with a nod, his hands stained from wood varnish. Mrs. Everett. She glanced around the modest space, taking in the worn floors, the wall of tools, the smell of cedar and coffee. This is it, Madeline said, standing beside Ian, her hand resting lightly on his. Her mother's gaze lingered on their joined hands. I expected something more. Polished. It's not polished, Madeline said. It's honest. There was a moment of tense silence before her mother walked toward the counter, where Avery sat organizing a tray of screws by size. And who's this? Ian's daughter, Madeline said. Avery. Avery stood and offered her hand, completely undaunted. Nice to meet you. Want to see the lamp I rewired? Her mother blinked. You rewired a lamp. Twice. The first time I made sparks. To everyone's surprise, her mother smiled. I did that once when I was 12. Burned a hole in my father's rug. Madeline watched the exchange, stunned. When her mother turned back to her, her voice was gentler. He makes you happy? Madeline nodded. He makes me better. Her mother exhaled. Then I suppose I should stop trying to make you worse. She left without hugging anyone, but as the door swung shut behind her, Ian turned to Madeline and said, "That went better than expected." "She didn't even insult my sweater," Madeline said, looking down. "That's progress." That night, after Avery was tucked into bed at Ian's apartment, their apartment now, since Madeline had officially moved, and he lit a single candle on the kitchen table and pulled out a small, square velvet box from the drawer. Madeline arched a brow. "You hiding jewelry next to the dish towels now?" He opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate ring, silver, with a single blue sapphire nestled in the center. "It's not flashy," Ian said, "but it's real. Like us." Her breath caught. "Is that? I know we didn't do things the usual way," he said, "but I want to do this part right. Will you marry me, Madeline?" She stepped into him and kissed him, slow and deep, before whispering, "Yes." The next spring, they held the ceremony in the park behind Avery's school. It was simple: white chairs, wildflowers, and the sound of children laughing in the distance. Ian wore a navy suit. Madeline wore a flowing white dress with no train, no veil, just her hair down and a ribbon tied around her wrist that Avery had chosen. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Avery shouted, "Only if I don't get to eat cake." Everyone laughed. Their vows were short, but full of meaning. No promises of perfection, just truth, partnership, and an open-door policy on forgiveness. Afterward, they danced on the grass while Avery twirled in circles nearby, holding a bouquet made of wrenches and paper roses. Business at the shop grew steadily, but they never expanded beyond that single corner. Ian said it was better to fix what they had than chase what they didn't need. Madeline agreed. Every Sunday, they closed the shop and spent the day together, sometimes at the farmer's market, sometimes on a picnic, sometimes just watching Avery perform homemade plays in the living room. They never went back to hiding any part of themselves. Not from each other. Not from anyone. And when people walked into their shop, some to fix a broken door, some just curious, they always left with more than they expected. Because Everett and Thompson wasn't just about repairs. It was about second chances. And love, built to last.